Welcome to another edition of On the Bookshelf. I'm Pete Solomon. It was the defining event of my generation, the Vietnam War. It entered our thinking, our politics, our lives. It was the first televised war, and each night, television news brought battles into our consciousness. In 1969 and 1970, I was in college in Atlanta. In 1969 and 70, Marc Levy was a medic in Vietnam, a much honored medic, but he saw things that still haunt him to this day. He's the author of the book, How Stevie Nearly Lost the War and Other Post-War Stories. And to begin tonight, he provides us with an excerpt.
Torque at Angkor Wat. I am fortunate I have no problems with highly charged emotional states, no past events which I cannot discuss. I am lucky. I do not struggle with feelings of loss, feelings of guilt, anger, flashbacks, nightmares. I sleep well. I do not toss or kick or leg cramp or leap at ghosts. I am fortunate. I have not one splinter of conflict within me. There are two of us in the great tan field of withered grass. It is the heat and drought that have done it. Everywhere the sun disk kills with its merciful light. Only the surrounding jungle which lords over buried ruins. The leafy sheltering jungle which may harbor unsavory men. Only the effervescent green canopy provides shade here at Priya Khan. I'm wearing faded blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and hiking boots. I am thin. It is easy to lose weight backpacking, and I have lost 30 pounds in 4 months. At 46, I am lithe and muscular. My thick hair is jet black. I'm told I look young for my age. I'm told there are no lines on my face because I do not smile. Often I say to myself, what do they know? And I say it without malice. In Cambodia, marijuana is sold in open-air markets at $5 per kilo. It is not uncommon to see young tourists huff on long, thick joints. I do not smoke or drink or take drugs, but Jack does. Jack is an engine of madness. He envies me. Jack wanted war and did not go and knows I did and pretends he doesn't care. In this way we continue the game, the one in our sweaty heads, the other the frisbee, which arcs like a rocket between us in this field near Angkor Wat. Jack is built like an iron bull. His broad shoulders frame a massive chest with twin pectoral shields. He is narrow-waisted. His abdomen is a ladder of muscle. His arms and legs are taut and firm. A square jaw juts a manly cleft chin. Beneath the pummeling sun, his steely eyes glow in their sockets. He is fast, agile, cat-like. Jack has smoked and drank and worked his body for 10 years, and today the red dragon tattoo, which spans his proud chest, breathes salty fire in the hot, sweet air. We are standing 50 meters apart. When Jack wings the frisbee, it cuts a well-placed bullet path into my waiting hands. My hands, which are bleeding and blistered. Nice throw, I say. Jack is astonished when I pivot and catch the energetic disc behind my back. He cannot believe it. I am 10 years his senior, but I have killed, saved, and lost men. I have the papers and medals to prove it. Poor Jack. Poor, well-built, swagger walk, shaven head, glow-eyed, stone-cold Jack cannot believe my prowess. You're damn good, he says. You're really damn good. When I toss the dancing circle so well, so finely placed, he need not move, not budge, not shift 1 inch to catch it. He is doubly astonished. Christ, he says. Here is how we met.
Words of Marc Levy, and Marc, we welcome you to On the Bookshelf, and we're delighted to get a taste of How Stevie Nearly Lost the War and Other Post-War Stories, your book of stories that are very powerful. The best thing I think you can say about a book is it lives in your head after you've read it, and that was certainly the case with yours. May we talk for a minute, before we talk about the book, about you. You were born in Newark, New Jersey.
I was.
When you were a young person, were you a big reader, big writer?
I started reading more when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm. Was writing sort of in the back of your mind? Did you think maybe no matter where you wound up, you'd do some writing?
I tried writing in high school, and I think the writing really began once I started going to the William Joyner Center in Boston, to the Writers' Conference around '98.
Mm-hmm. Well, that skips ahead a good deal, because I know that you dropped out of college and then entered the military, but when you came out, you earned a degree from Seton Hall and then earned a master's degree. When you dropped out of college, there was a war on, and you made this decision, and I know there were a couple of aborted starts before you were finally in the military. What was your expectation when you made the decision to enter the military, and what was the reality?
Well, my folks were not that well educated, so and the family situation was not great. So to escape that situation, having dropped out of junior college, I bought at the time, what I didn't realize was the propaganda. We're winning this war and so forth. And I just needed I needed direction. And the prokesters were convincing, and the recruiters talk convincing. So I joined and was initially kicked out from the physical exam because I had braces, and didn't know that parents actually wanted dentists to put braces on their kids because that would keep them out.
I didn't know that until I read it.
Yeah. So that happened, and I had the braces taken off, and then I was accepted, and the rest is history.
History indeed. You were a medic. How did you decide to take that path?
That just sort of was instinctual. And in hindsight, I think it had to do with just feeling or projecting that everybody needed help, when it was actually more myself. So Fort Sam Houston for 9 weeks, not very much helpful training, and discouraged when I got to Vietnam or encouraged to just set that all aside. Here's what you need to know. Here's the creams, here's the bandages, here's the morphine, here's your M16, here's your helmet, couple of bandoliers, off you go.
Now, you were a highly decorated soldier, and I'm not going to give you the chance to be modest. You earned a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars, among other citations. But also, you earned the 2016 Syracuse University Institute for Veterans and Military Families Writing Prize for the book that we're about to discuss. That has to be a great moment.
Well, a little bit of a clarity. That prize was for a prose poem that I wrote.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which is, it doesn't fit in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But the book has gotten some pretty good blurbs, and I'm happy about that. But I also want to say that as well, after Vietnam, 2 court-martials, a whole bunch of Article 15s, and I didn't realize what that was all about, but I don't regret what I did to deserve those court-martials and Article 15s.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of the characters in your book deals with this. Was this an opportunity to, by putting it out on paper, to put it out and give people a sense of what the pressures and the various things that people in the military have to deal with, especially during wartime?
Yeah, Stevie is the title character of the book, and he's fighting 2 wars. He's fighting this internal war, and he doesn't want to lose the war of getting over it and getting past it.
When you began to write and stories of yours were published elsewhere, this anthology, almost all of the stories were published before they became the book that we're talking about now. Was your thought to write to share things with other people who had shared similar experiences? Was it to illustrate the Vietnam experience for people who had never served? Was it cathartic? Was it all of those? Was it none of those? What was the motivation?
I think the early writing that was unpublished was clearly cathartic. It's just amateur stuff that a lot of writers go through, just getting out stuff and kind of honing and mastering basic skills. And then once I started writing stories that were a little more accomplished, I didn't have any intention that I was aware of, other than, hey, I can write about this. And I was very surprised when the first and second stories got picked up. So.
Now, How Stevie Nearly Lost the War is the first story in the book, and you decided to write it in the third person. How come?
I think, well, what comes to mind is that I've never been able to write a good war story. It just doesn't come naturally to me. I saw my share of combat. I tried writing a few first-person accounts. It didn't work. I think there may have been versions of Stevie in the first person. Didn't work. And for whatever reason, using the name Stevie and writing in the third person allows me to express, and create and imagine and develop a fully formed story.
But an interesting part of that story is his relationship with Cindy, who he really loves and respects, but he seems to have a very hard time connecting. In the meantime, when they communicate in the story, he is Silver Spartan, and so are you. That's not the only thing that's coincidental in this, is it?
That's true. The story is autobiographical. It has autobiographical elements, but I had by that time learned to let go of the literal truth and just create things and imagine things and steal things and weave things together that had never taken place in real life. And I also had a very good editor for that story, a man named George Dickerson, who I'd met in New York at a poetry reading on Veterans Day, around 97 or so. And I just kept wondering, who is this strange man? We got to be friends, and one day we're sitting at his kitchen table in Greenwich Village on Bleecker Street, and he looked at me and said, "You've never heard of any of my movies?" And I said, "No." And it turns out George was a pretty well-known actor. He was the detective in Blue Velvet and a string of other movies. But before that, he'd been an excellent editor in various magazines and had done a lot of acting prior to getting on the screen. And unfortunately, he passed away almost 2 years ago.
Was he the detective, one of the detectives in the first incarnation of Law and Order?
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know.
Okay. I'll go back to the library and look that part up.
Okay.
A big part of the story is this relationship between Stevie and Cindy. She, as he says, listens to him. He speaks, she's in the audience, they connect. She's willing to go farther than he is. Does this speak to people, or I shouldn't say people, does this speak to this character in terms of his ability to commit to something?
Yeah, Stevie is walking on eggshells half the time. And he wants, what makes Cindy attractive to him is that she's so naive. So he can approach her, and in a sense he's impelled to approach her because she keeps getting it wrong. And he wants to, as gracefully as he can, say, no, it's actually like this. So he's trying and learning and eventually they meet.
There's a brief scene in the story where veterans are playing speed chess, and they're playing hard. It's obviously important to them, and gambling is going on. And on the cover of your book, there's Achilles and Ajax playing a game of dice, as it would be depicted, on a Greek amphora. They're warriors. These people are warriors. Is there a connection?
Yeah, I knew the kind of cover I wanted, that it would be on an amphora. I had seen that kind of work, and I just thought, and I started looking at amphoras on Google Image, and happened on that one image, and I thought, that's it. And then I gave that image to a graphic designer who had done my website and said, can you work with this? And here's a photograph. And he designed the cover, and it's a work of art. It's a beautiful cover.
It is indeed. It's eye-catching. Yes. Now, we talk about the fact that that's obviously the first of many stories in this book. For instance, in Off the Road, which you wrote in the first person, a Vietnam veteran returns to Vietnam. Is this coming from your heart?
Off the Road is a travelogue. It's a straight travel account, nonfiction, and yeah, I left out a whole bunch of stuff, but that was had a lot going on in that story.
One of the big things that we learn about, but most of us will never understand, is that so many people came back from Vietnam with some form or another of post-traumatic stress disorder. And in the story, the thing they will always carry that centers, it's a stark look at PTSD. Could we talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, the title is a play on
the great Tim O'Brien.
The great Tim O'Brien, who I met. He's a really nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's preceded by a joke, which I heard somewhere. The joke runs, VA psychiatrist. Were you in Vietnam? Vietnam vet. Yes, VA psychiatrist. When were you there? Vietnam vet last night. So it's not fair to generalize, but some guys, for whatever reasons, were able to come back relatively unscathed, and other guys were better able to manage PTSD, same as today with Iraq, Afghanistan vets. And some guys, for whatever reasons, the length of tour, the year they were there, their own particular emotional, genetic, psychological makeup. Some guys, everybody handles it differently, and some guys have a hard time.
Is care for this better than it was, say, 40 years ago?
Actually, I think the future looks a lot better. The care, there's a whole bunch of techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy and immersive therapy and regular talk therapy and medication, way too much medication. But I've made some connections with the people that run MAPS, which is a organization that has done and is doing government supervised research on MDMA, also known as ecstasy, and they're having really, really good results with PTSD and with other forms of trauma. And they're hopeful that that kind of therapy will be clinically available within 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Many of the people who praised your book on the book cover or in criticism that I read are people that had similar backgrounds to you, people who have written of Vietnam, people who really understand deeply what you understand deeply and what you offer in the book. There's a connection there, isn't there, that in terms of the quality of writing that people bring back after seeing what you and others have seen, right?
Yeah, I'm grateful to some of the people that basically said good work. The story behind Frank is that there were other people who I sent the book to were queried who just didn't respond, and I thought, well, let me see who can I send this book to that I haven't queried, that has a background but is not so famous, which is why they're huffing me off, because they don't know me. So I sent just a hard copy letter. Took a while to find him, and no response for a month. And then one night around 9:30, the phone rang, and I thought, who calls me at 9:30? And I said hello, and this voice from like far away, with a little bit of an edge to it, said, "So tell me about Stevie. How's Stevie?" And I said, "Who is this?" And there was a pause, and he said, "It's Frank." And I said, "Frank who?" And he said, "It's Frank Serpico." And we talked for 2 hours, and we stayed in touch ever since. This is 6 or 8 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I plan to visit him in 2 weeks.
So the thing that you have in common, in addition to being writers, is he went through something that had to have been very, very difficult as a member of the New York Police Department, and you went through something that's unimaginably difficult during your military service. There's sort of a bond there, right?
When Frank and I talk, it's there. You can feel it. You know, he was shot in the face point blank. Larry, he was in APCs. He saw a terrible amount of stuff. Win Ba Chung escaped from Vietnam and saw all kinds of bad stuff. But my sense is that the veteran people that have written about it, you know, the blurb, the book, as Larry would say, they get the gag. But I'm grateful for the civilians that have taken the time to read it too.
It really had a profound effect. I'm a child of that era. When you were in the military, I was in college, and it was, of course, the first televised war. So Walter Cronkite brought it to my college apartment every evening. But that's not being there. That's seeing something reflected. And of course, the political times were very difficult at that time too, because I think it was the first war this country was involved in where the entire country wasn't standing up in patriotic lockstep. How difficult was that? And did you have any challenges when you came home in that area?
I was completely unaware that I was affected by the war. I only know that, and I think it's in the book in the title story, I came back, I had a year left to do, and I just couldn't do guard duty. I couldn't do KP. And when they told me to do that, I just said, I can't do it. They thought I was just being smart aleck, or that I had a chip on my shoulder. But I just thought it was unconscious. It was not articulated. I can't do that. I don't do that anymore. And finally got out and had run-ins with supervisors at work and lost my temper a couple of times. Never got violent, but just lost it. But never thought I had a problem until I traveled and backpacked in Asia for 8 months in '94. And when I came back, an old professor from graduate school who I visited said, you know, rather than look for work, you ought to take care of yourself. And I didn't know what he was talking about at first, but he was very graceful about it. And then I sort of got the gag and did some time at a VA hospital for PTSD.
You also did time as a social worker. What was that experience like, and were any of the lessons that you learned in Vietnam applicable to what you did when you were a social worker?
A lot of the work was not very challenging. The most challenging job I had, the most enjoyable job, I worked in New York, in Manhattan, on 72nd and Broadway for a branch of the Crime Victims Agency. And I was a social worker working with crime victims, face-to-face, hour apiece, couple of crime victims a day, either walking them through the concrete paperwork to get compensated, or talking to them, listening to them, helping them through. And I helped a lot of people, and that helped me.
Interesting, because in the military you dealt with people in physical pain, and some of them I'm sure you helped to recover, but others you lost. But the pain that comes with crime victims never goes away.
It never goes away, so you manage it just like you manage PTSD, and it was the best work experience I had.
Interesting. Interesting. Is there another book in you?
There is. There's a collection of war nightmares that I wrote down from '71 to 2008. And there's another book now in the works, which I'm going to call, the War Nightmare book is Dreams Vietnam.
Right. And that was published in January?
It was. And Other Dreams is a collection of my regular dreams from September 2016 to September 2017.
Interesting.
350 or so pages.
Wow. And then you have a website, medicinthegreenroom.com, and I know, having read it, that people, I think, rely on you and appreciate the fact that there is some place where they can share their thoughts, and you've solicited some literary work on their part. What's that been like?
It started out kind of as a simple blog, and I was just taking things that haven't been published and putting them up there. The basic motif is short, down and dirty vignettes, illuminated or illustrated with my photographs from the war or my travels, occasionally from photographs I take from the internet, try to credit the photographer, occasionally solicit work from other veterans, travel, poetry, war, post-war. Started out with one entry, and now I'm up to about 176. And also the personnel files of veterans of exceptional prominence. So I plowed some money into obtaining the records from the National Archives.
Interesting. When you are receiving other people's work, as a published writer yourself and as an honored published writer, do you read other people's work and have an understanding of where they are in their development as writers? And are there things that have helped you as a writer?
I edit for clarity. One guy, a friend of mine who I found after 40 years, he started talking to me, and at a certain point I said, you ought to write this down. So he started writing, and he ended up writing 40 pages, and I said, there's a story here. So it took a couple of months, and I just edited everything he wrote to me, and it's in 3 segments on the website.
Interesting. And beyond the book that you have in the works and the 2 books that all of us can enjoy now, are there other things, maybe in other areas, that you're also going to pursue?
I think the next book is going to be The Best of Medic in the Green Time, which is the website. It's just an array of stuff. And, in the back of my mind, I've been putting it off as traveling again.
Which, final thought is time is our enemy. Was there some sort of decision-making process that sent you back to where you had fought? Was it hard to go back there, or did you want to go there and maybe see what you had seen before and get some closure?
It was actually the opposite, the unexpected opposite. I was living in a little house in Northampton, and I saved a little money and knew that I wanted to travel, but I blocked out Vietnam. I just knew I was going to Asia. Well,
Marc Levy, it was a great honor to meet you, and I'm delighted that we had an opportunity to hear you share your thoughts. As we said before, your book is very, very compelling, and I wish you nothing but success with that and all of your endeavors. Thank you for being with us on the Bookshelf. Marc Levy, the author of How Stevie Nearly Lost the War and other post-war stories. The show is on the Bookshelf. I'm Pete Solomon. Thank you for joining us.